Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be doing a deep dive into the early Roman Empire today, but with a bit of a twist for all you royal history buffs out there.
Yeah, we often think of Rome and, well, the Republic, right? All those senators.
Exactly. But Rome wasn't always just about internal politics and republican values. Their rise to power involved a whole lot of interaction with, well, monarchs, kings and queens, powerful figures who shaped the course of history.
That's right. And these interactions weren't always peaceful. In fact, many of them were downright brutal and involved a whole lot of strategic maneuvering, both on and off the battlefield.
We're going to uncover those power dynamics, the clashes, the alliances, how Rome dealt with these powerful figures, and how those interactions ultimately shaped their empire.
It really makes you think, how a civilization that prided itself on Republican ideals navigated a world still largely dominated by monarchies.
Right. So let's start right at the beginning. Rome's rise to power in Italy wasn't a walk in the park. They faced challenges from various groups, including the Etruscans.
Ugh. Yes, the Etruscans. A fascinating and advanced civilization in their own right. They weren't exactly monarchs in the traditional sense, but held significant power and influence in the region.
They definitely left their mark on Roman culture, that's for sure.
Mm.
But their relationship was definitely uh, complicated, shall we say.
Yeah.
And it ultimately culminated in the brutal Veii War.
It was a real turning point. This war dragged on for a grueling 10 years. Can you imagine a decade of conflict?
It really highlights the ruthlessness that often characterized Roman expansion, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, they ended up conquering Veii and, well, enslaving its entire population. Not exactly a peaceful resolution.
A stark reminder of the realities of empire building, even for a civilization that would become known for its laws and, well, relatively advanced civilization, at least for the time.
It set a precedent, that's for sure. A precedent for how they would deal with future rivals. And as we'll see, this approach of using overwhelming force would come into play again and again in their interactions with various kings. But speaking of learning things the hard way, just a few years after their victory over Veii, Rome experienced a shocking setback. Remember the Gallic Sack of Rome?
Oh, absolutely. A real turning point, and a story that often gets overshadowed by Rome's later triumphs. It wasn't a conflict with a monarch per se, but it had a profound impact on Roman military thinking, and ultimately their future encounters with kings and other powerful rulers.
Imagine Rome, this rising power that had just asserted its dominance over the Etruscans, sacked and ransacked by, well, the Gauls.
And the Gauls, they came with some serious military tech, especially their cavalry, exposed some real weaknesses in the Roman army at the time.
Yeah, it was a humiliating defeat, no way around it. Forced the Romans to, well, reassess, adapt. They actually incorporated elements of Gallic military technology into their own forces, their saddles and some of their weaponry.
That adaptability was a key factor in their success. They weren't afraid to learn from their adversaries, even those who had, well, given them a pretty sound beating.
Exactly. So they faced challenges from the Etruscans, got a taste of defeat at the hands of the Gauls. Next up, the Samnite Wars in southern Italy. Now, while the Samnites weren't ruled by kings, these wars were absolutely crucial in solidifying Roman control of the Italian peninsula. They were basically setting the stage for their expansion into territories that were, in fact, ruled by kings.
50 years. That's how long the Samnite Wars dragged on. Brutal, lengthy conflict. It's really in these wars that you see, Roman military commitment and discipline, their, sheer tenacity really shine through. The story of the plebeian consul Decius, for example. He sacrificed himself in battle to inspire his troops.
Wow, that's incredible. Talk about devotion to the state. But that kind of mindset, that dedication, helps explain how they overcame so many obstacles. They learned, they adapted, they persevered.
Exactly. And all of that prepared them for, well, their first major encounter with a powerful Hellenistic king, Pyrrhus of Epirus.
Now, this is where things get really interesting for our royal history fans out there. We have Rome, this rising power, hungry for land and, let's be honest, dominance, clashing with a king who commanded a powerful army, a king who even brought war elephants to the battlefield.
Oh, Pyrrhus was a fascinating figure, no doubt about it. Brilliant military strategist, often compared to Alexander the Great himself. He posed a significant threat to Rome's ambitions. He was actually invited to Italy by the Greek city of Tarentum, who were feeling the pressure of Roman expansion.
So we have this rising republic clashing with a king with a lineage stretching back to Achilles. The Romans had never encountered war elephants before. They were probably terrified. But, as always, they adapted. They developed counter-strategies, proving yet again that they could overcome even the most, well, daunting adversaries.
And Pyrrhus, well, despite his impressive military skills, learned that victory often comes at a steep price. His victories against the Romans were so costly, so draining in terms of manpower and resources, that they actually gave rise to the term Pyrrhic victory.
A victory that comes at such a high cost that it's basically a defeat in disguise.
Precisely. His Italian campaign, while initially successful, gradually drained his resources and revealed the limitations of his power against a determined, resourceful, and let's be honest, very stubborn opponent like Rome.
A classic example of how individual brilliance can sometimes be overshadowed by the strategic depth and resilience of a larger, more organized power. But before we delve deeper into Pyrrhus's eventual downfall, let's shift our focus to another player in this complex game of power, the city-state of Syracuse in Sicily.
Ah, Syracuse, a pivotal player indeed. This city, while not a monarchy in the traditional sense, definitely wielded significant influence and, well, played a key role in Carthage. And their interaction with Pyrrhus further entangled the already complex web of alliances and rivalries in the Mediterranean. But that's a story for next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we left off with Pyrrhus heading over to Syracuse in Sicily, leaving his Italian campaign sort of hanging.
Yeah, like a real cliffhanger. So let's pick up where we left off. Syracuse, not technically a monarchy, but certainly ruled by powerful figures, played a key role in the lead up to Rome's big showdown with Carthage.
It's fascinating how Syracuse, just this one city, managed to draw in major players like Pyrrhus. It ultimately set the stage for this epic clash between Rome and Carthage.
Their strategic location, right there in the middle of the Mediterranean, their wealth, it made them a valuable ally, but also a pretty tempting target. Oh, for sure. Remember, they had already fended off the mighty Athenian Empire during the Peloponnesian War. Syracuse wasn't afraid of a fight.
Right, like they had a history of taking on empires, of punching above their weight class. But how did Pyrrhus get involved in Sicilian politics in the first place? He was kind of busy with that whole Roman thing in Italy, wasn't he?
Well, they found themselves in a bit of a bind, facing a new threat. Carthage, an empire based in North Africa with a powerful navy and some serious ambitions. They were looking to control the Western Mediterranean.
So they turned to Pyrrhus, the guy who had given Rome a run for their money, as a potential savior. That's quite a gamble.
It was, inviting a king known for his ambition, no less, into your city. But they were desperate.
It's so interesting how these power dynamics just constantly shift and change.
Yeah.
You have Rome dealing with Pyrrhus in Italy, then you have Syracuse looking to Pyrrhus for protection against Carthage. It's like everyone's playing this complex game of chess, just with, armies and empires as their pieces.
And Pyrrhus, well, he was always up for a challenge, and maybe saw a chance to expand his influence, carve out a new kingdom for himself over there in Sicily. But getting involved there, it would end up having some unintended consequences. It set in motion events that would directly lead to the Punic Wars.
And Carthage, they're a civilization that frankly deserves its own deep dive. They weren't ruled by a single monarch, but by a powerful mercantile elite. But they were no less ambitious than any king when it came to expanding their power and influence.
Oh, absolutely. Carthage was a real economic powerhouse. They controlled vast trade networks across the Mediterranean. They had a navy that was the envy of, well, everyone. Their clash with Pyrrhus in Sicily, it's a turning point in their relationship with Rome.
So Pyrrhus arrives in Sicily with his army, ready to take on Carthage. Did he manage to pull off another set of those Pyrrhic victories?
He did it first, early victories against Carthage on land. But his campaign, well, it was ultimately hampered by his own personality and a few strategic miscalculations.
It sounds like his ambition might have gotten the better of him, again.
Maybe. He had this tendency, you see, to alienate potential allies. Arrogance, a desire for control, led to tensions with Syracuse.
So he goes over there to help them fight Carthage, and he ends up pushing them away. Now that's some serious political maneuvering.
It's a classic case of ambition undermining, well, strategic goals. And Carthage, always a pragmatic power, saw an opportunity. They offered Pyrrhus a truce, even gave him some financial incentives just to get him out of Sicily.
It sounds like they preferred negotiating over fighting. Smart move, I guess, considering Pyrrhus was no slouch on the battlefield.
They were practical. And Pyrrhus, sensing the shift in power, maybe realizing he had overextended himself, he took the deal. Sailed back to Italy, left Syracuse to fend for themselves.
And how did that play out for Syracuse?
Not well. No Pyrrhus, no support. They were vulnerable to pressure from Carthage, and then on top of that, they had internal political turmoil. It further weakened their position.
So Pyrrhus goes to protect them from Carthage, and it backfires, leaves them in an even worse spot.
Wow, it's a real twist of fate, isn't it? His departure, it created this power vacuum in Sicily, a vacuum that both Rome and Carthage were eager to fill. It set the stage for a series of events that led directly to the First Punic War.
Okay, so what about Pyrrhus? He's back in Italy, abandoned the Sicilian campaign. Did he at least manage to pick up where he left off with the Romans?
Nope. He faced a Roman army that had, well, learned from their earlier encounters. They were eager to get revenge. He suffered a decisive defeat, had to retreat back to Greece. Dreams of a Mediterranean empire shattered.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant military commanders can be undone by bad decisions and an inability to handle those complex political situations.
His story's a cautionary tale. For ambitious rulers who overreach, who fail to secure the alliances they need, his failed campaigns against Rome, well, they paved the way for Rome to become the dominant power in the region.
In Carthage, they managed to outmaneuver Pyrrhus in Sicily. But now there's this power vacuum. Did they seize the opportunity?
They tried, but their attempts to gain control of some key Sicilian cities, it led them directly into conflict with, you guessed it, Rome. The seeds of the Punic Wars were sown.
Which brings us to the Mamertine incident, a seemingly minor event that ended up triggering one of the biggest conflicts in ancient history. It's crazy how a relatively small band of mercenaries could set off a clash of empires.
The Mamertines, they were Italian mercenaries. They seized control of the city of Messina in Sicily, found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. The rising power of Rome on one side, the ambitions of Carthage on the other, they appealed to both for help. Desperate.
Sounds like a dangerous game, trying to play both sides against each other.
Oh, it was risky. And it backfired. Carthage, eager to expand in Sicily, responded first, sent troops to Messina.
But Rome wasn't going to just stand by and let Carthage set up shop right on their doorstep, especially not with all that newfound confidence and a powerful military force at their disposal.
They saw this as a challenge, an opportunity to show everyone who was boss.
And that, my friends, is how the First Punic War got started, a war that would last for over 20 years and completely reshape the balance of power in the Mediterranean, all because of a bunch of mercenaries who made a pretty bad gamble.
The Punic Wars are fascinating. They show how the actions of kings, even those not directly involved in the fighting, can have a ripple effect across the entire political landscape. Pyrrhus's intervention in Italy and Sicily, it created the conditions for Rome and Carthage to clash.
And as we move into the Punic Wars, we're going to see how Rome, a republic, deals with an empire like Carthage. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into the early Roman Empire. Last time we left off on quite the cliffhanger, with Rome and Carthage on the brink of war.
And what a war it turned out to be. The Punic Wars, over a century of conflict, truly a turning point for Rome, and for the entire ancient world, really.
We've seen how Rome dealt with monarchs, powerful figures like Pyrrhus. But the Punic Wars, this was different. It wasn't just territorial expansion. It was a clash of civilizations, ideologies, economic systems.
Rome, a republic, up against Carthage, this powerful empire with a history of strong rulers, a complex power structure. It's fascinating to see how Rome adapted, how they ultimately triumphed.
Let's start with the First Punic War. Control of Sicily was, it was the main prize. But Rome, traditionally a land power, had to figure out how to fight at sea, challenge Carthage's naval dominance.
They had to adapt, and they did, remarkably so. I mean, they studied captured Carthaginian ships, figured out their shipbuilding techniques, even trained their legions for naval warfare.
They even invented a new weapon, right? The corvus.
Yes, the corvus, a boarding device, essentially. It allowed the Romans to, turn naval battles into land battles.
Genius. I mean, it neutralized Carthage's advantage at sea. They took what they were good at, land warfare, and brought it onto the ships.
Exactly. Roman legionaries, boarding enemy ships, turning it into hand-to-hand combat. Their discipline, their training, it gave them an edge.
The First Punic War, though,
yeah,
it was brutal, and it lasted forever.
Over 20 years. Both sides suffering heavy losses, impressive victories, crushing defeats, back and forth. But Rome, they kept at it. They were persistent. And their adaptations, their strategy, it paid off in the end.
The Battle of the Aegean Islands, right? That was a turning point.
A decisive victory for Rome. It crippled the Carthaginian fleet. They had to sue for peace. Rome came out on top, became the dominant power in the Western Mediterranean. But the rivalry with Carthage, it didn't end there. Not even close.
Tensions remained, and Carthage, well, they wanted revenge.
Yeah.
Enter the Second Punic War. And one of history's most brilliant, and let's face it, terrifying military commanders, Hannibal Barca.
Hannibal. He's a figure that still fascinates people today. Military historian, strategist. He was more than just a general. A master of logistics, a charismatic leader. He pushed Rome to the brink.
Crossing the Alps with an army with war elephants. Unbelievable. What a bold, audacious move.
His campaign in Italy, it was a masterclass in military strategy. Victory after victory, he understood Roman military doctrine, exploited their weaknesses. Trebia, Trisamene, Cannae, battles that are still studied today.
Cannae especially. What a devastating defeat for Rome. Can you imagine the fear, the panic in Rome?
Hannibal, he inflicted losses on a scale that was almost unheard of. But despite all his victories, he couldn't deliver the final blow, couldn't take Rome itself.
Why not? I mean, he was so close.
It's a debate that continues to this day. Some say he lacked the siege equipment, the manpower. Others believe he was playing a different game, trying to undermine Roman alliances, hoping they'd just give up out of exhaustion.
So Rome, somehow, they survived. They regrouped, they learned from their mistakes, and they turned the tide.
Resilience, that's the word. They adapted their tactics, put skilled commanders in charge. Like Scipio Africanus, they took the fight to Carthage.
And Scipio, he learned from the best, from Hannibal himself, defeated him at the Battle of Zama. The student surpasses the master. It's a classic story, isn't it?
It marked the end of Carthage's dreams of dominance. Rome, the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. But the Punic Wars, they weren't just about battles and generals. They transformed Rome.
In what way?
They were pushed to their limits. They had to change to manage this expanding empire. They developed a more professional army. Their administration, their bureaucracy had to expand. They had to integrate all these different cultures, these different peoples.
And all these interactions with monarchs, with empires like Carthage, it must have shaped their own ideas about power, about how to wield it.
It's a complex story, full of ambition, struggles, pivotal moments, the choices of individuals, the clash of societies. It shaped Western civilization.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the early Roman Empire. It's been a wild ride. Until next time.